Well, all right, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for all those who are coming in. I see some folks getting into the attendees area right now, so I'm really glad to have all of you aboard. We'll have a few more folks joining in as well. Today we've got a full house of about 50 people, so this is going to be great. I'm really excited to host this for you all today, and with our presenters, Sergeant Wally Stacy and Laura Rostamabadi and Denise Stryker, and we'll intro those folks here in a little bit as well. And then following that, Dr. Jason Weisman will offer some tips and strategies for you as you move through all this COVID crisis. So here's a quick agenda. As you see all the folks listed here who will be panelists, and Dr. Weisman's name, of course, from Sparks Psychological. We're going to hear from the panelists, as you see, about their experiences with the COVID-19 crisis. Then, of course, Dr. Weisman will follow, talking about coping and self-care. We'll have a little time at the end for Q&A. We'll be offering that through the day as well, or through the time we're together as well. And then there's a quick follow-up survey that'll happen once we end the session. We just want to get your impressions, get some ideas. Since this is our first webinar for the board, we'd like to get a few ideas for some future webinars as well. We are recording the webinar today to make it available for other clinicians and first responders who weren't able to join us, and we'll make that available later today or early on Monday. And then, as I said, the follow-up survey will happen from there. Our panelists today are Wally Stacy from Clear Creek Township Police. He's also our CIT coordinator for the board. Laura Rostamabadi, who is the ER and Behavioral Health Unit Social Work Team Leader at Premier Health. And Denise Stryker, Executive Director at Clinton County Services for the Homeless and the Homeless Shelter there. So before we get started, we have a quick poll. Hopefully this all works, and I will make sure that it does. But we just want to get an idea of some baselines here. So I'm going to launch this poll now. The question is, have you had to help yourself or any fellow staff members working through a COVID-related concern? This is all anonymous. Nobody's name will pop up in anything. We just want to get an idea of where things stand. So I'll leave this open for a couple of more seconds. Lots of folks getting started here. I'm really pleased to see that. This is great. Thank you. We got about 12 of the 18 participants voting, and I'm sure we'll see a few others come in right after this, so we'll see how this goes. Good, good. Thank you all for those responses. And I'm going to end that. And as you can see, we have about 63% of you have know of someone or yourself needing to get some help. So we know this is going to be a big issue for us moving forward. Even after the physical part of this crisis ends, we know that there's going to be a mental health surge somewhere coming. So we just wanted to get an idea of that. So thank you for your participation there. I wanted to introduce our first panelist this time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and you can see all of the panelists here as well. Wally Stacy is the Administrative Sergeant at Clear Creek Township Police Department, and as I mentioned earlier, the CIT coordinator for the county, Warren and Clinton counties, with over 30 years of law enforcement experience. So welcome, Wally. The floor is yours.
Thank you, John. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Appreciate it. And on this Police Memorial Day, I would just ask that everybody take some time to thank a police officer close by today and for their service. So, but as I reflected on the last several weeks and thought about what I wanted to bring up today, one word kept coming to my mind, and that was uncertainty. And it seems like we hear that word over and over again, many, many times during the day, how uncertain these times are. And when it comes to first responders, especially on the law enforcement side, obviously that's my experience, so that's where I'm going to speak from mostly today. uncertainty is difficult for us. Although we get into law enforcement because of the varied types of activities that we get to participate in, we do like to feel like we are in control, that we, when chaos is breaking loose, we are the ones in control and modeling calmness and so forth. And so uncertainty is weighs on us heavily. And as you've seen throughout this, daily things change. What's best practices one day is not best practices the next day. And the rules today might be different tomorrow. And that wears on anyone, not just first responders, but anyone. And one of the things is that we deal with on a regular basis is we get called to situations, and usually we're pretty good reads of people, and we can determine within a few seconds, who might be the difficult person in that call, and who might be the person who might be harmful to us. But we're in a time where we don't know who the person is who may harm us. It could be the innocent victim that we're there trying to help and to assist, that could be the one who has the potential to harm us. So that's very stressful. Another thing about law enforcement in particular is we don't like change. We spend lots of hours training. We like things, if this happens, I'm going to do this. If this happens, I'm going to do that. And you'll often hear with a new rule, new policy or something, the same old response, well, we never had to do it like that before. And there's a whole lot of not doing it like that before is going on right now. And so again, that's stressful in any occupation, but especially in this line of work where we depend so much upon consistency and being able to hopefully go into a situation and stay in control of that situation. So you take those things, the uncertainty, the dislike for change, and then the feelings of being out of control. Again, we're the ones that are trained to go in, take control of a situation, solve the problem, and move on to the next one. And one of the things that we train in our CIT program is, we have to be the ones to model calmness. You just can't go in and give orders for people to calm down. You have to model calmness for them so that they can respond to you and calm down. And these feelings of being out of control, that we don't know what the next day is going to bring, what the person who may harm us, all those different things that we have no control over are difficult for law enforcement. So you take that and you couple that with the fact that the police officer is an essential position. He's going to work every day, yet still at home. The family's at home. They're quarantined in the house, and the kids are having to work through their schooling and so forth at home. And there's that tension that exists between, I need to go help others, but I need to be at home as well to help my family. So there's a tension that exists between feeling like I'm needed at home, yet I need to be here so that I can help others. So, but it's not a complaint. It's what we signed up for. That's what we love to do. But there's still a tension that exists there. So then you couple that with the tension that can exist at work. And unfortunately, like just about everything in our society anymore, it becomes politicized. And this pandemic has certainly become a political issue. And a police department or any job site is just a reflection of society as a whole. So we have these tensions within our own workplace with people who feel like The governor's not opening up fast enough. The governor's opening up too fast. This is just a hoax created by whatever. All this is very serious. We need to take every precaution we can. And all those things provide tension in the workplace as well. And law enforcement, first responders, fire, EMS, we're not exempt from those kind of tensions within the workplace. Now, you take all those things and you couple that with the fact that now we no longer have our avenues of stress relief. The gym's closed. There's no sports to watch on TV. All these things that we usually, kind of get lost in on our days off, they're not there. Can't go out to eat or to a movie with the family. There's no avenue to relieve this stress, and that's a major problem as well. All right, you take all those things and you couple those with the fact that helpers don't usually ask for help, and it causes for a lot of stress during this time. We love to help others. The problem is we don't often ask for help ourselves because we see it as a sign of weakness or whatever stigma may be attached, and it can cause for a lot of stressful issues in first responders. And with that, I will turn it over to someone else.
Well, thanks, Wally. That's really great information, and a lot of information to digest and help understand as well. So next up, we'll have Laura Rostamabadi. She's a licensed independent master's level social worker, and she's worked in the medical discharge planning area for Miami Valley Hospital in Dayton for 13 years. She's worked with cardiology services, and then at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center for 3 years with oncology services. And now in her current role, she's been working with the emergency departments and at Atrium Medical Center. If I had that right, Laura.
Yes, that's correct. So, hi everybody. Thanks for having me here. I'm happy to be a part of the group today. So I will say I started to become aware of COVID back in really the end of last year, and in January, even though things hadn't really started to shut down here, I just sort of had a bad feeling about it. I certainly never could have predicted where we are right now, but there was just something that felt very ominous and very concerning, and just like this was kind of uncharted territory. So I just had sort of that bad feeling about it. And then around mid-March, when things started to really get going and things just changing constantly, it hit me pretty hard as a mental health provider myself. And then when things started to shut down, I had different coworkers, different social workers, and our chaplain and different people coming to me and saying, should we be offering something to our staff? And I would say for the first maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I kind of felt like I didn't even really have much left to give of myself, because I could just feel it impacting me so severely. And so fortunately, I was able to work through a lot of that in terms of being able to then give of myself. And I almost feel like because of how hard it hit me, that maybe I was able to get it out in that way, that I just felt it so hard in the beginning. But fortunately, I was able to kind of process through that, and just through the wonderful support people I have in my life. So as time has moved on, we have been offering some things to Atrium, to our own fellow staff. First of all, we've been doing a virtual support group 3 times a week. We've had a really positive response to that. My hope is that as time goes on and we are able to be around each other, to maybe even start doing an in-person group with 6 feet away. I'm not sure where we would do that or what that would look like, but that's kind of just an idea I've had. Our psychiatrist, Dr. Lazara, who is wonderful, he has started recording each week a mental health kind of awareness statement, and there's a whole section on our intranet website where people can go. They can watch his video. They can also, there's a bunch of people that have been blogging, different social workers and chaplains and counselors and people like that. So I've really been impressed with our organization's response. Our hospital president does a town hall meeting each week, sometimes twice a week. He was actually doing it several times a week when things first started really ramping up. He's backed off on that a little bit, but I feel like we've had wonderful communication from our leadership. I feel like they've been really transparent and sharing things with us about what the hospital was doing to prepare, getting certain areas ready for the medical response. And I think at a time when the world, like you said, Wally, is so uncertain and just so much not knowing what's going to happen, to be reassured by your leadership and to feel like you're being kept in the loop, I think is pretty huge. And that's I think part of what helped me to process all of it. I think some of the other things that we have seen in this area is just people being afraid to come to the hospital. So our census has really been up and down. We've had days where we got pretty low, and then we have days where it's like everyone kind of hits their breaking point at once, and suddenly we've got everyone coming from every which way with a mental health crisis. So it's been pretty up and down like that. From one thing that I've seen, I think now some people have been at home with their families, their spouses, their kids, their partners, whatever it is, for a couple of months, trying to work, trying to parent, trying to do all the things you do anyways, and just being within the four walls of the home. I think that has definitely, I mean, I've seen firsthand some people that have just really gotten to an absolute breaking point with that and pushed them into a mental health crisis. Another thing, we've seen kind of the perfect storm of some of our more ill patients, such as a schizophrenic person who's maybe experiencing some paranoia, and then you've got all the mental health agencies having to do things via telehealth, and that can be a little bit frightening, uncertain, confusing when you wheel a computer into a very acutely mentally ill person's room and tell them, okay, talk to this little man on the screen, and that's supposed to somehow make them feel better, but it could also be exacerbating their symptoms due to whatever the nature of their paranoia is. So those are some challenges that we've seen. Let's see, I have seen staff dealing with layoffs in the family. I see there's been staff I haven't seen in a while because they've been furloughed, which is kind of ironic when you think about working in healthcare and you'd think, well, you're the one person who's safe from losing a job, but we've got all kinds of people laid off because of the procedures being shut down for so long, and then just other stuff, people being less willing to come to the hospital when they're maybe having a heart attack or having a stroke. They're trying to hang on at home because of that fear being so strong that if they walk into the hospital, they're going to be infected with COVID. And so a lot of the times what we're seeing is by the time people get here, it's quite acute as far as a crisis goes, whether it's physical or mental health. So now here we are with things starting and getting back to operation, operating in whatever format, partially open, somewhat open, on the way to being open. And so now suddenly people are just supposed to feel comfortable leaving their homes. Well, it's not going to be that easy for everyone. There's people who are going to be, I think, very fearful for a long time. There's the talk of whether it's going to reemerge in the fall. Again, Wally, as you said, all the uncertainty, I think that's just the name of the game in so many avenues. Just, like, are we really coming out of it? Is there more to come? And we just don't know. And the vaccine still seems so far away. So I think it's just a lot to it. And I've noticed myself, again, like I said, it hit me very hard in the beginning. I had times where I was really struggling. I've been doing much better with it for the most part, but I do have those times where I can feel myself getting really, like, quick to become irritable. Like, I'm not a big tech person, and so all this, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, but all these technology things, I got really frustrated yesterday, and I literally made a little post-it note of all the different virtual programs that I have had to learn since all of this, which is silly, but it did kind of make me feel better just writing it down. I was like, okay, every time you interface with whatever agency or person out there. It's like, like everyone has to learn each other's systems, and like Atrium has this one and these guys have this one, and it's like you have to just keep learning them, and there's always like some kind of a thing with getting hooked on, and it's like, oh my goodness, like we didn't really ask for this, and it's like thankfully we have it. So it's that weird thing of I'm grateful but I'm also annoyed, and then so I don't know if this, I'm kind of going all over the place here, but it's there's just a lot. I feel like there's a lot of ground to cover. I want to be mindful of the time. So John, do you want me to kind of wind it down, or how much? I don't know how much time you really. I can't hear you. I think you might be on mute.
Yeah, that's my fault. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, we'll wrap up and
Okay.
move on to Denise, I guess.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks,
Hi.
Laura. Very good wrap up, and a lot of information there as well that's really pertinent. Next up, Denise Stryker, who is Executive Director at the Clinton County Homeless Shelter. She administers all the overall operations of the shelter, staff, fundraising, volunteer recruitment, and grant writing. The shelter opened in 1988 as the first emergency shelter in a rural Ohio county. So,
Yes.
Denise,
Hi. Good afternoon, or good morning, everybody. Thank you, John, for introducing me. I really appreciate being part of today's webinar. And I'm, when John first asked if I would participate, I started, the thoughts that came to my mind were that, in jobs such as working at an emergency shelter, you don't think of your own needs. When myself or any first responders, I believe in my heart that anybody working with folks who are experiencing homelessness, they do this, it's more of a calling. And people that we touch, the lives we touch and people that we see every day, they're already in a crisis. They're in a crisis mode, when they first get to the shelter. And so we're responding every day to try to make sure that we can help resolve those crises and help things get back to normal. So I guess when the pandemic first started, we weren't even thinking about our own needs, or me, I can speak definitely for myself. We had situations going on here that we were concerned about. We see a lot of folks that have mental illness and addiction, that, addiction issues that we're working with and trying to make sure that they have a warm bed to sleep in, a place to live. And those who are ready to look for employment, those are some priorities. So I think any of us that work as first responders, we're always putting before our own, and that's what we like doing. That's our thing, I guess, is what I want to say. But so it was really hard for me when I started thinking about, how has this impacted me? And so I started asking staff, we meet every morning and have a roundtable discussion basically about how things are going personally. And I think that has helped so much during this time, that we can share some of our concerns and share some of our fears. And many of the staff, we have staff that have kids at home and they're doing homeschooling, and after working a full 8 or 12-hour shift, they're going home, to help their children with school. And they also, we've had a staff member who has experienced their spouse losing their jobs, so there's unemployment involved. And they're sharing concerns of, when we leave here, is there going to be toilet paper on the shelves, or are we going to be able to get the items we need at the grocery store, because we're getting out so late that if you don't get there early enough, you're not going to get what you need for your home. And then we have the personal things going on right here at the shelter in the beginning, of not having the sanitizers that we needed to make sure that, we have 4 houses here, and we have 2, a men's house and a women and children's house with 38 beds. And so, all of the changes that the staff have been seeing, needing to clean and sanitize often, and wearing masks, and all of those changes and the biggest change has been trying to keep the fears that those who are living here at the shelter, keep their fears and keep them calm, so that they aren't picking up on our fears and just making sure that they are safe and that they understand some of the changes. Our typical policy is that everybody gets up in the morning and then it's mandatory for folks to go look for employment and housing and be gone during the day for 8 hours. And we provide the transportation and the tools to go do those things. Well, everything switched where we were we implemented the stay-at-home policy, and you weren't allowed to leave the house unless if you had employment that you were leaving for a job. And so that created quite a few challenges. There were a lot of people that had a hard time understanding that they couldn't just leave whenever they wanted to. And so, we had a lot of people that were just really concerned about, I just want to be able to leave when I want and come home when I want. And we've had some challenges there. Just keeping the staff employed and coming to work every day. We have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation, so we always have a staff member on duty. And so that has been a challenge because there have been some concerns. We've had a couple of folks that have been hospitalized since they've been here that were being tested for COVID. We had an employee that when this first started that was being tested. So there was quite a bit of fear there as far back as March that a lot of the staff members had fears that they could be taking that home to their children and their homes. Fortunately, neither of the cases were positive, but in that waiting period, waiting to see, there was a lot of concerns on our staff and other residents living here that they could be at risk of contracting the virus. I had some of my staff members share some of their, I asked them if they could share their words of how this has impacted them. And these are the folks who do case management and frontline work with folks that are living here. And I'd like to share that with you because I think it really will say a lot about what folks that are directly working with residents, how they're feeling during this pandemic. One staff member said, I would say that the pandemic has made an already tough job harder. The world was basically placed on hold, yet we are still expected to operate as normal to most degrees. It has added extra stress to oversee the extended precautions we are now having to take, not to mention the added stress and frustration the stay-at-home order has placed on us as well as the residents. We as staff had also had to absorb their concerns and frustrations as we do our best to hide our concerns and our worry. Another staff member said, one of the biggest challenges for myself is learning how to adjust to a new normal for work, home, and home life. Each day we have people who look to us for answers, and even with things being put on hold, those needs are not going away. Overcoming obstacles is what we do best. And then our third staff member who does full-time case management, she said, for me, I think it has been emotionally stressful. We bond with residents and see them on a day-to-day basis. Our emotional upset with, and this is anonymous for privacy purposes, and not knowing if he had COVID-19 and yet praying that he survives the illness he is suffering for already. We made him our first priority for weeks, and our heartbreak for him has been real. We watched the other residents struggle with addictions, anxiety, and mental health, and so we try to interact and keep a positive note going, doing what we can do to get through this. For all those who work in shelters for the homeless, the struggle is real. We love them and we want them to stay positive, and sometimes the positivity is hard for the individual to see. So those are some things that, 3 staff members shared some of their personal things from their heart that I thought was important to share. I guess some of the things that extra duties responsibilities that we have, placed on our staff, we try to also provide some incentives as well. So some of the things that we've done is provide flexible hours. Many of our staff have 3 or 4 children at home, young, where they're helping them with school. So hours are flexible. Paid time off hours are, they're, you know, if they have paid time off hours, they can use those. And if they don't, we're very flexible with hours, and there's no disciplinary action if somebody needs off for an extended period of time. If somebody wants to change schedules with another staff member, that's fine too. We've been approving that. We've had staff members working from home, appreciation emails and cards and things like showing our gratitude. We had a board member who just went out and bought lunch for everybody the other day. She and her husband came and delivered lunch to us. Those are things that have just lifted the morales of folks working here. And there's been so much done for the residents living here by our local businesses. We've had local pizza places delivering pizza, and we had a bunch of Coney dogs delivered the other day. So, you know, we're getting a lot of wonderful gifts from our local community. And I love to see that, because we have people living here that'll say, you know, they don't even know us. Why are they doing this? So they really get to see the goodness from the wonderful community that Clinton County is. And I'm so proud to live in this community and see all the giving. And it's what's helped to make the shelter help our operations continue. So thank you again for letting me share a few words, and thank you, well, quite a few words, but I think my time's almost up. So thank you very much, John.
Oh, thank you. Great information. I appreciate that. Dr. Jason Weisman is now with us to offer some tips and tricks, I guess, to help everyone cope a little bit better as your first line and frontline folks getting through all this and trying to work together as well. So I'll share the floor now with Dr. Jason Weisman.
Thank you. I will say, you know, I'm open to questions as we go. I do want to be sure that we address some of that and that we don't leave a whole lot of folks hanging there at the end. So I'm going to try and I'm going to try, like Laura said, to figure out this technology and make sure that I'm doing things right, and share my screen here and not hang up on everybody. So let's see. Is that working so far? I have no idea what it looks like on the other end.
You're right there.
All right. So just, you know, just to go back and talk more about some of the things that I've heard so far, and to kind of reflect on some of the things that we know just historically and from the literature. First responders and clinicians tend to be more sort of calm under pressure. There's a need to be that face of calm, like Sergeant Stacy was talking about earlier, where you need to be the person that demonstrates kind of how to act in a given situation, especially in a crisis. So we tend to be a little bit more conservative with how we express ourselves, and we tend to try and keep as much of that kind of inside as long as possible. Very often some of us will go home and we'll just kind of bleed all over the house and, you know, and we're a crying mess. A lot of us, though, don't do that. And so there's kind of sort of a certain kind of person is drawn to the sort of work that we do. And those are some of the qualities that we tend to have, is that we're much more aware of how we feel, but we also try to maintain that to a certain extent. The issue, though, is that none of us are immune to the additive effects of stress over time. So the more things that we're dealing with over time, the harder it gets to deal with that. And the more that starts to tax the basic coping skills that we have. Looking back, you know, I was thinking about as everyone was talking, I was listening to some themes, and I think that it's really remarkable that all of us feel somewhat disconnected from most of the rest of the world. You know, a lot of us have only been able to FaceTime with families or you know. Do that with friends, and then, you know, there's the coworkers that we see every day, and then we go home, and if we're fortunate enough to be working from home, you know, we have all of that stuff to deal with at home as well, which is much more challenging than I think any of us thought that it would be. Myself, for sure, it's been very, very challenging, and so we feel kind of disconnected, but we're all kind of going through the same thing. There's that uncertainty versus control that everybody's been talking about. What are the things that we have control over in a time when we have no idea what's going to happen next? And that is very, very stressful for anybody. particularly for folks who like things to be a bit more predictable. Clinicians are in a business in which we understand and learn about and predict human behavior. The same thing goes for first responders. They need to be in a situation where things are much more predictable and they have that sense of control. And right now, I don't think anybody feels that way. And it's a lot to deal with, I think, for everybody. And so I think that one of the things that Sergeant Stacy was talking about earlier was there tends to be this sort of stigma about seeking help, about saying that things are not going well, about feeling like you may look kind of weak in front of your peers or in front of your supervisors, and that really kind of builds on that reluctance to really talk about things. I think that's probably one of the bigger issues. I can say that as a psychologist. Obviously, I'm biased towards that. I do think that we need to be sharing and discussing those things. And I know that not everybody deals with things that way. And so I think just looking at this as this is a very sort of stigmatized issue, and how do we go about working with that, and considering that there is so much stigma attached to it. And so I think probably the best thing to start with is, what are we looking for in particular? And so what we'll tend to notice if we're paying attention to ourselves over the course of a relatively stressful period, we want to be watching for several things. We want to watch for whether or not our diet is good, right? And whether or not our sleep is good, whether or not we're getting enough exercise. Okay. If we start to notice that we're tired all the time, that's usually a sign that something is not going well. And I think that's easy to say. Obviously, things aren't going well, right? I can't leave my house. I can't talk to my friends or my family, yada, yada. But as we see ourselves taking on more and more, we need to be thinking about how much more tired we are than usual. And then we develop some stress-related issues, things where it gets harder to sort of not think about some of the things that have happened to us over the course of a day. It gets harder to sort of turn off those crises that we've had to deal with when we go home than it usually is. And that's because there's so much other stress going on, and it's sort of hard to direct our attention in one way or the other. We start to see ourselves drinking and using more substances. I know for a fact that alcohol sales have been up since this started. And so I think that that's a perfectly legitimate way sometimes to occasionally have a drink to kind of deal with things or to relax, or just because it's enjoyable. But as we see more of that over time, that becomes a bigger issue. And I think we need to be paying attention to that. Depression it can present itself in a variety of different ways, depending on the person. And so we need to be watching for that as well. And if we're not careful about all these things, eventually we get into a space where we do have a mental health crisis. And we know for a fact that suicide rates for first responders and for clinicians are much, much higher than they're reported. And I think that, I don't want to get into the statistics today, but I think that a lot of people would be surprised on how very, very high those statistics actually are for the helpers who very often don't ask for help, for the people who feel like we need to be the example. Very often we're taking on more than what we think we can, than we can actually deal with, but we think that we're capable of doing that. So those are the kinds of some of the things that we need to be mindful of. And the way that we'll see some of this is we'll see changes in the way we sleep. We'll see ourselves getting tired more often. We'll see ourselves eating more. All the conversations that I've had with so many different people over the course of the last month or so, everybody is at home. We're all putting on weight. We're all walking past the kitchen, every 5 or 10 minutes and grabbing a handful of whatever's available. And it's usually not the healthiest thing in the world. And so we're starting to see some of that. In addition to that, we're not able to go to the gym. And so we're having trouble kind of managing. I have much more access to the things that are not healthy anymore and much less access to the things that are. And so we're starting to see changes in appetite and weight. We need to be watching our blood pressure. We need to be mindful of that. That's always been kind of a good signal of how much stress you're really dealing with in the moment. We need to be mindful of if we're getting distractible, if we're getting forgetful. We have a lot of things to kind of track. And a lot of us tend to rely very heavily on a routine, on a schedule, on some these are the things I know. And now I'm working in my dining room and I've got papers all over the place and I can barely find my phone half the time. And so we're starting to see the effects of some of that stress and some of that forgetfulness and distractibility. If you're getting headaches, that's a sign typically of stress. If you're prone to migraines and you're getting them more often, again, that's probably a sign of stress. If you're second guessing some of your decisions at home or in the field, you know, what's kind of going on with your brain? Are you more distractible? These are things to be thinking of realistically. Are you becoming more irritable? We're seeing that kind of across the board. Laura talked about it very openly, which I appreciate. I can, you know, from my own experience, I've been a lot more irritable lately. I think that's one of the ways that kind of stress presents itself. We're not able to control things, and that makes us really kind of aggravated. If we have a hard time, again, turning off some of the things that we've had to deal with over the course of the day and some of these crises we've had to work with, that's a sign that we need to be mindful of. And again, drinking more or drinking more often, right? And substance use. Those are the things that we need to be watchful for. The best way, and I'm going to fall back on just the best things that we know from hundreds and hundreds of years, the things that make the biggest impact on being able to cope with stress are exercise, diet, and social connection, not necessarily in that order. So those are the things I think right now that everybody can be much more mindful about. What am I doing and how am I dealing with this in terms of exercise and diet and being connected to people, which is very difficult right now. So exercise, physical fitness is often linked to lower rates of depression and PTSD, and that goes for everybody. That's first responders, that's clinicians, that's layperson, that's everybody. That's always been a very good predictor of how we deal with stress and how we deal with depression. And in fact, a lot of the treatments that we have for depression actually require us to get up and go out and start doing things. And we find that that's behavioral activation. We find that that's very effective in treating depression very, very quickly. The caveat here is always consult with a physician about any exercise regimen you're going to do. That's a very important thing, particularly if you're prone to high blood pressure or any other kinds of health-related issues. You should always be talking to your primary care doc about that. However, gyms have been closed. Mine has been closed. I have not been happy. And so we need to start looking for different ways to do these things at home. We're doing home-based exercise routines, body weight exercise routines. There's a ton of things that are out there. It's just a couple of letters and a mouse click or two away. If you go to YouTube, there's all kinds of body weight exercises and all kinds of routines and things that you can do at home. One of the things I think that could be useful, going back to some of the trends that I've heard today, is some of our agencies and our leadership has been a little bit more supportive than I think that we've been looking to them more often to be supportive at this point. But they've all been setting up some things for us, right, to kind of keep us more kind of engaged and to be more supportive of us. And so I did hear a couple things from Laura about how they're doing things at the hospital. And I heard some things from Denise, how she's sharing things, and people are sharing things with her. I think if we go back to exercise and we look to our leadership, one of the things that we can do is we can set up things like sit-up or push-up or squat challenges at work and say, okay, well, who wants to sign up for an exercise challenge? Who wants to see how many sit-ups they can do on a given day? And what would that look like? And can you challenge your coworkers? Can you challenge your peers? I have a challenge right now going on with one of my children to see who can do more push-ups and sit-ups and squats in a given day. And we've developed that as a way to kind of not just make sure that our heart rate is getting up, but also as a way to cope with some of the boredom that comes with being at home 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because we're lucky enough to do that. And for folks that are not, to cope with some of that stress as well. Running, hiking, biking, walking, anything that you can do outdoors with a given safe distance of other people. We need to get some of that sunshine. We need to get some of that fresh air. Sunshine can help us in a lot of different ways. It helps us to give us some vitamins. And we've linked the lack of those vitamins in particular to depression. We know that we have kind of a seasonal kind of depression. People tend to get more depressed kind of in the winter, in the darker months, because we're getting less sun. And so getting outside, I know it's raining today and for a lot this week. It seems to be that way. Every time I talk about this with anybody, it's usually raining. But we have had sun. I believe there was some yesterday. We were able to get out and get some sunshine. That's an important thing to do, even if it's just in your yard and you're doing laps around your house. One thing to do certainly is to get good rest. We need to have that downtime for our bodies, especially if we're feeling more fatigued, if we're feeling more tired more often. It's probably a sign that we need to be getting more rest, but we need to be careful about how we're doing that. One thing to be watching for is how much coffee we're drinking, how much tea we're drinking, and have no caffeine 8 hours before we go to bed. Caffeine has a what we call half-life of 8 hours. And so 8 hours after you've drank your last Coke or your last cup of coffee, that caffeine is still in your body and it's still kind of doing its thing. So we want 8 hours since you've had any caffeine before you go to bed, and reduce your exposure to light about an hour before bed. That can include television. A little harder for folks that work third shift. But that's something to be kind of mindful of, is how much light you're getting right before you go to bed. That can interfere with your sleep cycle. Diet, often linked to stress. And that's, again, something that we've known for a very, very long time. And again, always consult with your physician about any kind of dietary needs that you have. Some of the things we want to be more mindful of are foods that increase kind of being tired, and foods that increase the cortisol is a natural hormone that occurs in the body. It helps us kind of deal with stress, but it also does some other things to our body, and prolonged exposure to cortisol in the body has a really negative impact on our body in general. And so the more stress we're under, the more cortisol we have running through our body, the more that starts to wear down all of our insides. It leads to heart disease. It can lead to diabetes. It can lead to just a variety of different things. And so we want to be kind of mindful of what we're eating and whether or not that's contributing to the problem or if it's decreasing the problem. Drink lots of water, always important. Probiotics and fiber tend to be a good way to help move some of that cortisol and to keep kind of the sugars down and to do all those important things for the body. And whole grains and vegetables, again, these are all important things. And the better that we are about our diet and the more we're mindful of that, the more likely we're going to be performing well in the field and doing what we need to be doing to help other people. Alcohol and cake in moderation. It's important, I think, to be mindful that we are still people. We're not machines, most of us. And so if we're going to be drinking, that's fine, as long as we're doing it within reason. It's the same for any kind of sugar intake or anything else. In moderation, it's okay. Narcotics, on the other hand, that's always problematic. And so we need to be very, very careful about that. And what I will say is that if you are drinking more, if you find yourself drinking more, if you have started using substances, or if you have been using substances for a long time, this is a good time to go and address some of that before it really has a much more negative impact on your work and on your relationships. At a time when there is more uncertainty, when there is more stress, the more that we're doing some of those things, the worse it's going to get. And then social life, really connecting to people. This has been really, really hard for a lot of us. You know, we can't really actually connect with folks. And so we have to figure out new ways to do that. This is one of those ways that we're doing that, is over the internet. It doesn't feel as fun as it usually does to be actually in the room and sharing space with a person, certainly, but it's a lot better than just me being in my house by myself, you know, for extended periods of time. So finding ways to connect with folks. We've been doing a lot of video chatting with family. We've set up some things where, you know, once a week we'll have, you know, a drink or two with a couple of family members, brothers, sister-in-law, where we're having some conversations with folks. And really trying the best that we can to get connected. I find myself making a lot more phone calls now and really talking to people more often. So I think that we have to find ways to do that in a much more creative way. I know that I'm fortunate in that I'm in a private practice for the most part, and so I don't have to see a lot of colleagues on a very regular basis. And so there's a lot of that political concern that's coming up about some of these issues, and a lot of the tensions at work. I don't have to deal with that, and I'm lucky. But for folks that do, it's important to find ways and new and meaningful ways to have some conversations with colleagues. And I know that this can be a sticking point. I would love to hear more of how people have been doing that and managing that in the workplace, because I know it's very, very difficult. I don't have a lot of, honestly, creative suggestions on how to get around kind of that piece. These are folks that we have to work with, and maybe finding that common ground and how do we get the job done. It's sort of, this is what it is for right now. and how do we move forward with that? It's very difficult, but I feel like we do need to have those conversations. We do need to say some of these things out loud. The longer we allow those kinds of feelings and that kind of disruption to fester and kind of inside of us, the more likely we are to see that effect of stress over time to become much more problematic. And so we do need to create some interesting spaces to have those discussions. Atrium has been honestly on the cutting edge for a lot of this stuff. They set up the vlog so folks can go in and talk about things. I love that. I love the idea of maybe even having an anonymous platform wherever you work for people just to go in and dump all that stuff out in one space and then walk away from it. I think that that's a great idea. We're not really connecting with folks, but we are kind of removing some of the problems that we're having by having a space to do that. It's really, really challenging, I think, right now to be connected to other people. And so that's one of the ways where we all have to get kind of creative. What we do find is that across the board, social support is one of the strongest predictors of how well we cope with stress or how well we do not cope with stress. The more support that we have, the better we are able to cope with the things that are going on. And so this is probably, as important as healthy diet and exercise is, this is probably one of the strongest predictors, I think, right now of us being able to manage some of the stress that we're going through much, much better. And it's ultimately one of the more challenging things in moving forward, and how do we cope with this? So some thoughts, just some thoughts I had as we were dreaming some of this stuff up. One of the themes I heard today was, I don't have a lot of control over things anymore. That's really disturbing for me. In my profession and me personally, I think that's true of all of us. So some of the things that we can do: structure your time. Where can you take control over yourself right now? Because you're being required to wear a mask at work. You're being required to do some things that you don't normally have to do. And so what is it that we do have control over? And that's ourselves for the most part. We have control over our behaviors. And so what we want to start with is maybe structuring our time. How do I want to spend my day? Our kids no longer go to school, which has been really, really challenging kind of for a variety of different reasons. And so one thing that we had to do for one of our kids is just write down every half hour, this is what you're going to be doing throughout the day. That has been super effective. It's reduced stress in the house for myself. It's reduced it for the rest of the family. It's reduced it for that child, because that child isn't kind of wandering around and then kicking stuff and jumping on furniture and getting yelled at. And now we have a much more structured kind of day. That's something that we have control over. So I think that we should grab a hold of that with both hands. One of the things that we can do is build in some projects. I've seen a bunch of my friends getting a lot of stuff done at home now that they've been just kind of sitting on for a long time. So a lot more projects going on at home. I think that's an opportunity for us to do more and to sort of create a more comfortable space to live in. If you had some goals, if you wanted to sell your house by the end of the year, this is a good time to do some of those projects. If you've got the time and the ability to do that, I would really recommend that as a way to deal with some of the stress. It helps us to kind of shed what was going on at work and to kind of focus our brains on something else. And I think all of us in all of our fields are very, very driven people. We kind of have to be by nature. And so finding a way to focus on something else for a little while, I think we all really, really need that. And that takes us to hobbies and pastimes. If you're reading, that's great. If you're a musician, that's great. If exercise is your thing and your gym is closed, I'm sorry, but we have to figure out how to work with that and move forward. So really focusing on what we can do and what we have control over, I think, is key. And that's really kind of all I've got for right now. Sergeant Stacy said that I was expected to fix everybody's problems. I certainly wish that I could do that. I don't think I can, though, and that's what I've been able to do.
All great stuff, Jason. That's really wonderful. And you're right. You can't fix everybody's problems right now, but you can give them tips and tricks, right?
We try.
Well, the floor is open for questions. I so far have not received any from people, so it sounds like you've covered a lot of bases at this point. A lot of folks who might have answered a lot of their questions, but I'll leave it open for a little while here for a few minutes. Any other words of wisdom from any of the panelists at this point?
Yeah, John, I just thank you, Jason. I thought those were great tips, and although you didn't solve all my problems, you helped with quite a few of them, and I do appreciate it. I think those are tips worth hearing. So, and thank you, John, for putting this together, and I think it was great.
Absolutely. One question that came in here: did the panelists learn anything from Dr. Weisman's suggestions that they think they can implement in their own lives?
Yes, yeah. I will say that I've had some trouble sleeping. I had it like a couple weeks where I was sleeping well, and then lately I haven't been. And hearing Dr. Weisman talk, I realized that instead of reading my book, I've been looking at my iPad, and I wonder if maybe some of the background light from that screen time is maybe the culprit there. So I might look at doing that a little differently here moving forward.
I think one thing that I meant to put in here, and I figured we'd naturally sort of discuss it, is kind of limiting how much of the media we're getting involved with. A lot of us are watching the news all the time. It may be playing it in the background right now for somebody. And I think kind of monitoring how much we're really investing in what's going on in the media and things like that. Laura, I'm reminded of that because I sort of, and I don't want to expose you here, I wonder what it is that you're looking at on the iPad right before you go to bed. If it was me and it's my Facebook feed, I know that there's just a ton of stuff from the media in there. There's a lot of political things in there, even from just friends and people that are they're really frustrated with what's going on. So being kind of mindful of how much time we're spending really paying attention to the media right now is also really important. I would want to limit that. I think we all need to know kind of what's happening, but I'm not sure that we need to be listening to it 24 hours a day.
So I will share that it's nothing that meaningful. It's I've been getting caught up on the back episodes of 90 Day Fiance. So I think that's good advice. But in my own case, I think it's probably just the light from the device that is maybe, because these were all filmed long before COVID was anyone even knew that term. And I should be embarrassed to admit that, but I figure, hey, it's good to be honest.
Denise, any thoughts on your end?
Again, I'm grateful to be a part of this. I think I've learned, again, I am one of those people, Dr. Weisman talked about that kind of, we put others' needs before ourselves, and this has helped open my eyes up to even making sure the staff are okay on a daily basis. That's really important to us. Their safety and health, and the safety and health of those who live at the shelter is always top priority. And preparing for this webinar and being, hearing everybody's remarks, they've been, instrumental in helping me to reflect on what I need to do. Yesterday, I went out and got flowers and a thank you card for everybody, because it's just something we should be doing all along. And all of our folks that are working so hard and have the hearts to help. And, and I've been trying to limit my Facebook and online watching TV as much too. That has really helped me. And those are some of the things we talked about amongst ourselves as staff members and colleagues here at the shelter. So I'm grateful for this opportunity, and it's taught me a lot, and I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
Well, thank you both very much. We've gotten a couple of nice comments here today too, so I'm really, really appreciative. Somebody did say that they've never felt like they've been a depressed person, but during the shutdown in the beginning, mental breakdown happened for them. We all broke. Person's husband recognized this and knew it was, from missing grandchildren and family. So it's important, we all want touch, right? We broke that shutdown, and he took me to see them. But they've now become a member of mine in the tribe. They're the only ones we visit now, and it helps. So I'm also sewing and selling masks, and even meeting people I don't even know helps a lot. So we need other people. That's this person's feedback. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Lots of people, happy to see some of us again. Denise and Dr. Weisman, and Sergeant Stacy. Everybody appreciates the insight that you've given us. We have another question here now too. What can the public do to help you as a panelist? Is there anything that we can do to make your job easier now?
I always ask for prayer. Personally, you know, the leadership, we have 9 board members that are volunteers, and they meet monthly and make decisions for the shelter. We had to shut down our donation center, or we did shut down the donation center, which has impacted a lot of lives. It helps people in the community and not just folks living here. So having the food pantry and the donation center shut down has impacted a lot of lives. And the board, you know, those are some of the decisions the board helps to make. And so I think prayer for the residents, definitely, and just the leadership here at the shelter and the staff is something that I ask for.
John, I'll just add.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay. I just add that, you know, patience with us as we are trying to adapt and do our professions the way, in a different way and certainly a different time. And and then patience with each other. So that if we're doing something different than what you're used to, try to understand that. I know even just as far as coming into our building to file a report or to meet with an officer, you know, we're asking people to call ahead and make it an appointment to come in, so we don't have too many people in the lobby and those sort of things. So a little patience as we all work through this, and obviously patience with each other, and because everyone's cooped up, and we certainly don't want to have to come to people's homes to deal with their arguments because they're cooped up together. And so those are things that I think the public can do. And I think what a lot of the public is doing is showing their appreciation for what we do. And a kind word goes a long way. So we thank everyone for that. So
awesome. Let's see if we've got a little. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. My big thing is I think just check on each other. I'm seeing people more because I'm coming to work every day at this time. So I know some people are isolated, but whether it's people that you see physically or it's people you know of in your lives who maybe don't have a huge circle of friends or maybe live alone or things like, just check on people. And if you think someone's not okay, you're probably right. And don't be afraid to ask them those delicate questions because they might just be waiting for you to ask. So, and if you're wrong, great, they're fine, no harm done. But I mean, if you're getting that sense and this is someone you know, sometimes the people like you are going to see that more quickly than somebody else. And sometimes that's how people get help in a crisis. It's because someone in their job or in their family or their neighbor notices that just they don't quite seem themselves. And literally sometimes people, they don't know how to bring it up. They may not even realize it, but they are just waiting for somebody to ask. So don't ever be afraid to ask about that. It can make a huge difference in a person's life.
Great advice. Thank you, Laura. That's great. We have time for one more question that we've got, and this is for Denise. This person says she was worried about a client who lives in the Highland County shelter, and she's appreciative of that they've extended that family's stay during the shutdown. Have you allowed the same thing, Denise, in your shelter? And what if a new family is in need of room? Are you taking new families?
Yes, with the social distancing, we have decreased our capacity quite a bit. However, we have had some open beds available. We do have an isolation room in both the men's house and the family house. However, we've had families here and have extended total number of days permitted for many households. And please, just if you know of somebody that needs shelter, give us a call or have them give us a call. We are part of Region 16, which includes Highland and Fayette and Pickaway and Ross counties. So if we're not able to help, we do coordinated entry with those other 4 counties to see if they have availability in their shelters. So we all work together and meet regionally every 3 months. So just make sure to give them our phone number, and what we do everything that we can. And we also have right now, anybody who's high risk for COVID-19, we have funding to help keep them out of a congregate location. So if you know someone who's pregnant or 60 and over, or has some, some immune issues where they are at risk and higher risk of receiving, getting the COVID-19, let us know if they need shelter, because we have some other options that might be available.
All great information. Thank you.
Yes.
That's really helpful. And I want to thank all the panelists for their time today. I hope everyone attending enjoyed hearing from everyone, getting some great tips from Dr. Weisman as well. And we want to just send you off with a really happy thought that it's Friday and we can all look forward to a good weekend. So thanks again for everyone being here. And this will be available later on today or first thing Monday for anyone who wasn't able to attend. We'll send that link out as well. And don't forget to fill out the survey that will pop up after we're done here. Thanks again for attending and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.